From breakthrough devices to the bottom line, we explore the investment trends, the commercial models, and the strategic thinking required to bring neurotechnology to the global market. This is the Business of Neurotech. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Adam Fraser, and today I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Keith Murphy, co-founder and CTO of Attune Neurosciences, a company at the forefront of non-invasive, deep brain neuromodulation. Lots to talk about, Keith. Very big welcome to the Business of Neurotech podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Adam. I'm really excited for the launch of the new show.
Great. Thanks for being here. And perfect guest. Lots to unpack and explore about neuromodulation, ultrasound, this kind of science commercial tension amongst, in any startup and your funding journey as well. So look, why don't you kick things off, Keith? I think you'd be known to many in the neurotech community, but for those that are new to what you've been doing, just tell us a bit about your backstory, your career today, and how you ended up at Attune.
Sure. I originally did my PhD in behavioural neuroscience. So I worked with fruit flies a long time ago now. It was like 12, 15 years ago. And I was really interested in how the gut detected food and promoted sleep in the brain. How do these wires sort of pass A to B? And I got really into optogenetics, which is genetically encoding ion channels that are sensitive to light, so to speak, and sort of stimulating circuits and seeing what would happen. And while I was doing that at the Scripps Research Institute, it led me to the vagus nerve. Adam, you probably have heard a bunch about it. This is a very accessible nerve right on the outside that promotes all sorts of effects, mainly parasympathetic. It sort of relaxes the whole body. And my sort of idea was, well, it's super accessible. Maybe we haven't figured out how to stimulate it just right. And I wrote a grant that got accepted in F32 to work on that at Stanford. And while I was there, stop me if I'm meandering a little bit too far off track, Adam. While I was there, I sort of realized that genetically modifying this nerve with optogenetics and trying to stimulate it with that way, while precise, had no business in scalability. Viruses are a really tricky business. And in the past, people have actually died from dosing that incorrectly. That happened at UPenn some time ago. And it was the same in mice where I was testing this idea. I was trying to make mice sleep through the vagus, and it just was kind of a mess. So as many startup founders do, I pivoted in the moment and I sort of looked left and right, like what's going on here that may be better than the vagus nerve? This is Stanford University, right? There should be something at the forefront. And I was fortunate to find focused ultrasound. So focused ultrasound, for everybody that's not familiar, is creating a lens of sound. Now you can do this with space, like a physical lens, just like light, or you can do it in time by pinging individual elements in a sequence that looks like a lens. And you can actually dynamically steer pressure through three-dimensional space. So if you connect this to the side of somebody's head, now you can precisely target individual nodes of the brain and interact with them. And for a long time, people have been using this tool for surgeries. So they'll put such a high pressure that tissue will start to burn. It'll start to coagulate. So you can destroy areas of the brain. And at Stanford, my question was, well, what if you turn it down? How far down do you have to turn it to reversibly change activity? So you're not killing tissue. In fact, maybe you're not even harming it. You're just changing what's happening at those sites. And I developed a bunch of fiber optic techniques where we listened to neurons and figured out what worked. And we published some really awesome papers, and it sort of led me and my co-founder, Rajiv, who's been incredible. We founded this company to try to turn that into a human device that just didn't exist at the time. So that's the journey. You can cut any of that you need.
I know. Great story. The humble finance professional on the other end of the mic. You're trying to blow my mind early with the space-time continuum kind of references.
The space-time.
We're going deep sci-fi here, like so much in neurotech. I've already done a Star Trek reference on the podcast. It seemed like so futuristic not that long ago, and it's here and now today. We will unpack more about Attune and focused ultrasound, but just a couple more things, Keith, on your journey. I'm intrigued, when did the science guy kind of become the commercial guy? You clearly, like all scientists, you're a curious guy, you've got the pursuit of the intellect, you're doing fascinating stuff. But, splitting the atom, sequencing the genome, you're not thinking about TAMs and commercial product market fit. When did you start thinking, wow, this is so mind-blowing, I can see commercial applications for what I'm doing here.
I would love to say that I had some transition, like light switch moment, but the reality is when we write grants as scientists, we're always writing that we're doing something to translate it, right? It must eventually become a company, or else what have we done it for? There's NSF and like Star Trek type research that doesn't have that to your earlier reference, but we had that always from the beginning. So I actually went to Stanford to build a company off of whatever I could learn. And it was very basic. And in fact, it never really reached that flipping point where we're like, this is ready for humans. What we really found out at Stanford was this does something powerful. How on earth would you do it in humans so that it could reach the commercial potential that we've known all along, which is, to your point, access to any region of the brain dynamically, non-invasively. So something you just put on your head and go that can treat anything. And that vision was always clear. It's just, honestly, it was just like, when were we going to get funding to try to build this apparatus that we believed would give us that access? If that answers any of the question.
No, it does. I work in a startup scale-up as well. And in the early days, hey, Keith, you're the technical founder. The guy over here is the commercial go-to-market founder. It sort of blurs because once you're in a startup, everyone becomes a Swiss Army knife. Everyone's doing a bit of everything. But even now, still relatively early in the Attune journey, do you find yourself having to course correct where like the science guy and Keith takes over and go, wow, that would be really fascinating to explore that. And then you kind of course correct to go, hang on, what's the ROI? What's the payback? Is there an addressable market here? Is that still kind of a tension in your own head or even within the team?
Oh my God, absolutely. And I would love to say like, I wish it wasn't and that we could pursue our own journey. But honestly, we've discovered things that I just on the route find really interesting. You asked me when we had met, Adam, that, are you guys still doing sleep? And we are. We are grant funded by several organizations now to do really exploratory sleep stuff. But early on, as we were funded to do sleep and we had done it in mice, we just realized, and like I would credit Rajiv with this more than myself, we realized that it's really difficult to get a medical device prescribed for insomnia because insomnia is really not easy to measure. There are tons of behavioral therapies that work, but people are too lazy to do. And it requires these really deep technical measurements to actually say, we think this person has insomnia. And some people don't have insomnia, like they don't have it on paper, even though they feel like they never sleep. So it's just, we were tangled up in such a big, deep mess that we knew we could do it. Like we have protocols that we're running now that we feel over control and sham really induce sleep, and they're awesome. But put that aside, like what's a market that's really easy to address? And we can talk about this later, but, we've sort of found our way to a few indications that are much cleaner commercially. There's a big unmet need. You can prescribe early on in the patient journey. I can talk about those, but chronic pain and OCD are some of our favorites. We're exploring a little bit with schizophrenia and tinnitus as well. We found good effect size in all of those.
Great. Look, nice segue, Keith. Why don't we get into Attune and what you're up to? And look, primarily, business focus, funding, commercial go-to-market podcast, but of course we will touch on the science. We won't go, deep
wherever you want to go, Adam.
Exactly.
Wherever you want to go.
But again, working in the neurospace myself, transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, is probably something many people listening will maybe familiar with. I'm just interested at a high level how focused ultrasound, TMS, maybe even just broader other neuromodulation methods, do they compete? Do they support each other? What's the relationship there with other fields in this space?
I'll give two answers. One's more of a generous to humanity answer, and the second's more business oriented. Generous to humanity is nothing competes until everybody's cured or treated permanently. And for every indication we've ever looked at, depression, schizophrenia, pain, these things are so massively untreated and they're getting worse. Like phones and inactivity and bad diet, it's just all getting worse. So we've always felt like there's a really great space for us to do real good. That's the motivation of Attune. It's very personal. The reality is, though, that when you are trying to get a medical device to market, an insurer has to look at what they're paying for already, and you have to lower their cost, and you have to come in the same space. They're really very infrequently thinking about superimposing these things. They're kind of like, well, what's the one and done that gets them low enough where they leave us alone? Because the reality is commercial payers do not, they don't want to pay. It's really their job to avoid paying, which is like this huge issue. So TMS is like, you were asking TMS. I think you even mentioned in the past, how do we compare against that?
Yep.
We had to think about the TMS business model a lot in our personal journey. One of the main questions, and I actually learned this from the founder of Instacart early on. He pointed me to this. He's like, well, why is every TMS company failing miserably despite having such tremendous clinical success? If you look at these trials, particularly the new Stanford accelerated protocols, it is super effective. It's awesome. I mean, people are getting way better. So why on earth is this failing? And talking to a bunch of people who are patients who have actually gone through this journey, they can't afford not only the cost of 36 treatments, but losing a day of work every time you have to do this, and battling the stigma of going to a clinic where somebody is going to do this huge noisy machine over your head. It's like a very scary process. So when we were thinking about those 3 failure points, and they do still have this for ultrasound, they have giant helmets that are in clinics that are a little bit intimidating. We thought, well, okay, let's break all that down. Let's make something that somehow has a compliance that the FDA can get behind, that's at home, that is multi-indication. So there's a way to disguise what you're actually being treated for. Somebody in the military could use this device for enhancement, somebody for chronic pain or tinnitus, or you could just be depressed. And sometimes when people are depressed, they don't want people to know that they're being treated for that. So we disguised it by being a device that's more of a platform than a single treatment, a device that could do all the things. And we've so far succeeded in doing that. And then the last point kind of follows the first. Accessibility is like, they can't be driving. It needs to be cheap. It needs to be something that's shipped right to their home. So we made our device as small and lightweight as possible. And we've worked a lot with smart systems that sense and detect features of the face and the head so that the ultrasound knows where it is. So it knows how to target these brain regions reliably. Did you want to see the device, Adam? You asked me to bring it in here. You want me to?
Look, for those watching on video, let's go there next. So, as you alluded to, firstly, totally concur on TMS is just one example where the purity of the science and the efficacy seems so overwhelming, but this kind of hidden bureaucratic collides with the pragmatic realities of the US hospital system and just the medical, the medtech environment more broadly. So I think that's a theme that's going to come up frequently on this podcast. But again, there's hardware, there's software, there's hardware, software bundle, there's wearables. I think you're effectively taking a wearable approach, which embeds some software component, but is portable, can be taken home, and I guess you're going direct to consumer rather than sort of B2B through the hospital system.
Yeah, we are direct to consumer, which is not to confuse us with a consumer product. So a consumer product typically will mean you can buy it at a Target and it's a wellness device. There's no medical claims. So we're a medical device. We will plan on being prescribed. So your physician will say, you have depression and here's a brain area that we can stimulate, try to make you better. And they'll send that electronic script to us, and then we'll ship to your house and get you off to the races. There is an MRI step that is in between there, but that's actually covered by insurance already. So, we don't worry too much about that. But we're trying to break down all barriers of entry to deep brain stimulation, which traditionally has been drill a hole in someone's head and stick a wire in there. And that's incredibly successful and gold standard. But you cannot expand that to billions of people.
Sure.
And ultrasound's the only way to do it in the deep brain. So here we are.
So let's have a look at the wearable. It's something what people can take home at night and watch TV, sleep. How do they typically use it?
So this is our older generation. The new one's in the works. It's looking very nice. But it's 128 little wires in this cable. And it goes into these, what we call transducer arrays right here. There's 128 little emitters. And this is our older one that has an EEG in it that we've recently gotten rid of, but you can see it. Oh, my camera's tracking me. You can see it just looks something like this.
Right.
And you put a little bit of gel over your temples, and the device will actually look at your skull contour and map to the MRI in real time. So it'll figure out where to target. And people can fall asleep in it. They're very comfortable in it. it looks a little bit sci-fi. We're going to try to make it look more like an Apple product later. But it's not unlike, like the Apple Vision Pro. It's not that far off, right? So people could say what they want about it,
So for audio listeners, it's somewhere between an EEG cap and a headband, and maybe think Batman second movie. It's it's very non-invasive by definition, but it's not cumbersome, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've worked hard to differentiate ourselves in that domain, making it really feel like more of a product than a medical device.
It's an exciting vision at Attune, both from the the science of focused ultrasound and what that can do alongside other neuromodulations, acknowledging those friction points and making it as accessible and easy as possible is a huge objective as well. In terms of indications, I'm guessing there's dozens and dozens, if not hundreds over time, you could focus on. You've mentioned sleep, you've mentioned pain. What does the early kind of indication roadmap look like?
Yeah, I love that you said hundreds because normally, maybe 10 years ago or even more recently, people would have pushed back and said, well, there's clearly defined buckets. But as you know, Adam, like the reality is like transdiagnostic features, like people rarely have just one thing. They have sort of an amalgam of many things.
Yeah.
And our ability to look at the person and pick out brain areas that we can tune and tweak dynamically with a single device allows us to get after hundreds of things. So I appreciate you saying that, and I agree. Still, when you are thinking about go to market and your audience, they know, you always want to pick a small niche domain, crush it, land, and expand, right? Like I think you even said that to me last time we talked. And for us so far, that is chronic pain and OCD in 2 branches. So medical devices of our class, so we're a type 2 medical device. That means that we're not like life supporting, but we're also not a Band-Aid. So you usually need, it's a risk benefit sort of question for the FDA or regulatory bodies, but you only really need a few hundred people and a few sites in comparison to a drug trial, which can be tens of thousands. And these can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So we're starting with chronic pain and OCD for the reasons we discussed earlier. Like it's a pretty clean patient journey. The opioid crisis has left people, payers, insurers, all sort of looking for things that are non-addictive, that are non-drug. The administration is now starting to support non-pharmacological or non-traditional meds for pain. And we've gotten really strong results that have target specificity. So if it's of any interest, I know this is more of a business podcast, but our studies are the best controlled studies of any neuromodulation device because we can keep the device in the same exact spot and simply move the focus over maybe 5 millimeters, 10 millimeters, and then the effect in those groups is much less, or even within that participant. So we're getting really beautiful and scientifically rigorous pain reduction and OCD symptom reduction.
Like with any sort of market research or outcome, there's qualitative and quantitative, and often discuss in mental health and psychiatric, softer metrics like focus and feeling better. And, they're real, but arguably, it's in the eye of the beholder, it's harder to measure is another attractive aspect of pain beyond, it's such an important use case. It's so pervasive. It's so life impacting. People just know. It's like, I'm unequivocally feeling less pain. The sort of less subjectiveness to the efficacy data.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. There's probably a lot of people that would push back and say that emotion has a lot to do with pain. But I tend to agree with you that I think it's a little bit more easy to self-assess than something like depression or anxiety.
Yeah.
Did me and you talk about the ARPA-H programs or maybe not, but we were fortunate. I'm sure your guests would be very interested in that project. We're working with a company called Adaptix, and they've developed something like a continuous glucose monitor, but for any molecule in the body from interstitial fluid. So we're going to continuously monitor markers that we believe will be more objective measures of pain continuously while we do our treatment. And the idea is we can aid other studies that go through the FDA so they have objective measures that lower the noise, lower the sample size, and increase your chance of getting approval, which has been a problem for pain. But to your point, pain's actually a lot better than other things, probably, for the most part.
Look, last question on the go-to-market and the TAMs, and then I want to touch on the funding journey to sort of wrap things up. Is mental health, psychiatry related disorders, is that the ultimate kind of North Star for where you see your technology going? Or are you kind of open-minded as to how the tech develops and which opportunity comes in what sequence?
You mean psychiatry versus like neurology? Or?
Yeah, like I guess mental health, depression, is this one of these, as founders, there's steps and sequencing in the way that you sensibly have to go through, but looking back in 10 years' time, do you hope that your tech is focused on indications related to depression?
Yeah, maybe with too much confidence, I often say to people, I'm like, you give me like $100 million, I will create a treatment for everything known to man with one device. And I truly believe that. So I think the breadth and ability of our technology and also our collaborators, we work with, UCSF has been one of our biggest teams that we've worked with. They are so aggressively pursuing new treatments with our device because of the opportunity space that the whole world, including them, are kind of figuring out everything as we go. Dr. Jolene Fan, Andrew Crystal, Leo Segura, they're over there. Their results in epilepsy and depression and tinnitus and schizophrenia, like just mind blowing. So some of this we don't even have to do ourselves. We just bring it in. So I don't know, Adam. I'm not sure where we're going to go first, but if I had to guess, it's like, OCD and pain will be early wins. We'll start figuring out depression, dementia, and preventing that is on our early roadmap. And I think that actually will allow us to step back into what might be considered more healthy subjects so that we can actually prevent the brain from deteriorating or from losing capacity over time.
Yeah.
And that's where we think, human enhancement comes in. This is kind of a long roadmap, long way away. But
it's sort of a double-edged sword. And again, in my day job, when I'm not podcasting at Omniscient, we have the same thing. I mean, the upside of being in neurotech and neurology and brain-related medtech, just almost the infinite nature of the opportunities, the breadth of the opportunities, the size, sadly, the size of the TAMs, the human impact. But then, like any startup, you've got scarce capital, scarce people, scarce resources, you've got to focus. And it does generate attention because I'm sure your phone rings based on the nature of the research you've done, and there's different institutions want to work with you. There's a brand new indication. Suddenly PTSD becomes a thing, then it's OCD, then it's Parkinson's, and they're all such worthy use cases. But like any startup, you've got to focus.
Yeah, it's been hard. I'm glad you have the same problem. I think neurotech, it hasn't quite had its moment yet. Maybe you'd argue the BCI space, but I think what we're all doing is just like the opportunities are just boundless, and it's incredible to work on. We'll see where we end up at the end of the day.
All right, let's shift gears to the funding side of your journey. So again, just unpack a little bit how old Attune is, what funds you've raised, who you're partnering with, and I'm interested again in your experience as the technical founder of being part of that, the pure kind of corporate finance, Titans of Wall Street aspect of the role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, this is something Rajiv, again, he's my co-founder and our CEO. He leads these efforts. And I play a large role in sort of meeting with investors and getting them up to speed on the tech and direction and so on. So far on that journey, we have raised about 8 or 9 million in equity. And then we've gotten almost actually quite a bit more now in grants. In fact, we just recently got 13 million in grants. So we're kind of good on the non-dilutive side as well. We're raising our Series A, which is hopefully close to closing. And that's going to get us sort of over the pivotal trial line. And I guess you were asking my role in that more specifically, or?
I guess
from a technical side.
Well, I don't want to oversimplify the world as, the science guy in this corner and the business guy in that corner. Yeah. But you come from a clinical research science background. So I'm intrigued when people talk to you about discounted cash flows and internal rates of return and payback periods. Have you found that a good learning opportunity, just the pure business side of what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess this was a huge difference. And I think I'm becoming decently well-versed at it. Probably most people would argue not, but having to design experiments and technology around, let's say, reimbursement and the TAMs and things like that you're talking about. You have to hit certain benchmarks for the insurance companies to use measures that they can then put into their models so they can figure out if you're better than TMS, right? Like in chronic pain, you usually have to get a fair amount of people with 50% more or more reduction in chronic pain, because they can look at a spinal cord stimulator and use the numbers. How much did we save in costs when these people stopped coming into our clinic to buy opioids? Like these are numbers they can use. So I spend a lot of time learning about how they think so that I can position the technology to achieve that. If I was off guardrails and I never thought about that, like God knows what I would be doing. If I was just simply engineering in a vacuum and saying, this has to be really, really amazing and perfect, I think the company would already be gone. We just don't have enough money to do that. So there's been that. I learn a lot about equity and things like that from Rajiv, and how to keep investors from past, and future sort of happy and motivated and working with us. You also asked about, who is important on our funding journey. Yep. And Amy Cruz, she's been a vital part. She was the first person in with Prime Movers Lab. She invested again with Satori Neuro. We also had Jenny Rook and Vikram Chowdhury come in later from Genoa Ventures. They've been incredible. And there's a bunch of other names, but those are some of the big ones. And they're vital to the journey, right? Like they sort of help you navigate this totally unknown space of neurotech. Like this is just like a very new sector for investors that everybody's a little uncomfortable around.
Yeah.
So, and you've probably gone through that, Adam. Like, it's like a weird space, right? It's like hard to find comps, right?
Yeah. And it's exciting as well. It's an emerging class of capital where, again, Amy would probably correct me. Shout out to Amy, friend of the pod. Great that you've got her on board. But 10 plus years ago, neurotech wasn't a standalone kind of investment class. And now with Amy and with Nexus Neurotech and many others, this, where the opportunity arises, the capital follows. And you see how much funding is going into BCI, for example, as well. So, we're all kind of, the industry as a whole is building the plane in midair, so to speak, because it's new. And again, back to BCI, just as an example, the payback periods, this is patient capital to varying degrees, but in many cases, VCs would look for nearer term, maybe paybacks and exits. And I think in neurotech, it does need a slightly different lens.
Yeah, it's a longer term usually. I mean, you don't necessarily need like an evergreen fund, but you have to at least show up with like the idea that, I don't know, like Medtronic would use you or a drug company would use you as a biomarker, just so that at least some people are comfortable with the idea of like, an exit at $1 billion or whatever it is. But honestly, most of these things have the capacity, if uninterrupted, to become a huge behemoth. Your company as well. They all have that capacity. It's just like whether or not they get bought out before they reach that, like Instagram and Facebook, right? Like Instagram essentially is Facebook, right? Like that's their... Anyway.
Well, it comes back to the TAMs again, ring the bell. Fifth time I've probably used that phrase. But as you said earlier, and I say this with sadness, not like some finance zealot of, it's amazing how, despite the advances in tech, and we'll touch on AI just in the final question, mental health disorder, look, the data is utterly, depressing, excuse the meta term, but it's
absolutely.
Things are getting worse, not better, for a whole range of neurodegeneration, neurology, and mental health. So hence the need for the neurotech sector, hence the need for capital to fund ideas that can start to address this.
Yeah, absolutely. And Amy mentioned, you probably spent a lot of time with her. She doesn't invest in software, not probably for the same reasons I'm about to mention, but I think now with the AI wave, like not commoditizing, but like making run-of-the-mill software very easy, hardware and data around the brain are now really investable things. And this class of narrowing wealth, these billionaire class, like a lot of them are aging out and they're really looking for something that's going to help them. So I think that is another motivating sort of source of capital for this whole adventure. And I'm here for it. And same as you, I see these big TAMs and they scare me, but at least we're here fighting on the right side of the fence.
Exactly. And the longevity movement, I must, that's a podcast of its own, but it's kind of
it is.
Definitely an ancillary thing. So last thing on the funding. So it sounds like you've completed seed and you're pretty close to Series A. Is that where you're at?
Yeah, knock on wood. We're hopefully closing the round pretty soon. If any of your listeners are interested in the space, we're open to more people participating, so.
Great. I know it's a big, have you found it, distraction's the wrong word because it's just a necessary part of startup life. It's the oxygen you need to keep the patient alive. But have you found it a big time commitment from your side and your team, while you're in mid-fundraising?
Yeah, commitment, yes. It has been really helpful for our product design, honestly. We were forced, we started our Series A journey long before we were ready to raise it, just create introductions and relationships and so on. We just sort of learned through people picking apart our strategies where there were needs to sort of refine things and look towards bigger visions because there are competitors in the space that may not even be ultrasound. So it's been helpful. I mean, we've changed as a company in the last 2 years pretty dramatically just because of what funders have taught us. And, we've just learned because they just found a weakness that we didn't really think of. Yeah, I get it. It's funny. Apoorva Mehta, he was the Instacart founder. He's doing well. He's doing cardiac stuff now, but he used to come hang around here and he was really insightful in pushing us away from the clinic. He challenged me to think he's like, Keith, why is TMS so good and failing so miserably? And when I say miserably, I'm talking like the biggest company in the world, Brainsway, the market cap is 500 million. It should be way more. So why is it not? And that's helped really inform our decision to, as quickly as we can, move away from the clinic. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's right. I don't know, but it's certainly been informed by those discussions.
Yeah. Well, the market will mark your homework at regular intervals. It comes back in real time. So, look, I want to be respectful of your time, Keith. Could talk about this topic for hours, but just one final question. Time stamping when we're having this conversation, it's early April 2026. I mean, the AI boom, we were talking internally here, literally every month, it's like another seismic change, and the AI, air quotes, the AI strategy you had 3 months ago is already obsolete, and it's Claude Cowork, it's agentic, it's OpenClaw. Obviously, you are predominantly, I guess, a hardware play. There's clearly a huge amount of smarts in the hardware, but how are you seeing this AI tsunami? How is it impacting your business? And you're mid-fundraise, so it's kind of a very, very dynamic time to be raising capital.
You were actually very much software forward. I would say probably a slight majority is software of what we do, but it really is a hybrid. So I do think about software a lot. It has made the day-to-day stuff that is known in software extremely easy, with the asterisk that it often comes with security holes, right? There was actually the leak, if you saw last night, by Claude Code. So now we know that they have been thinking about security holes quite a bit. Not because they leaked it, but because the software that they're building is now really looking for how to improve security when building. So it's turned a few engineers into 100 engineers. So it's unbelievable. I can't believe. And I would be scared to invest in software only companies that didn't have big data. So our company is also really thinking about collecting mass amounts of data and keeping that data safe and de-identified, but learning how to optimize therapies based on it. Because AI is really good at that, right? The thing that is so unimpressive, and you should tell me if you've ever seen anything, I've never had AI give me a totally genuine, novel idea that, I just was like, wow, great idea. That wasn't already something that was known and formulaic. It's really good at stuff that's been done. It can do it so fast and so perfect. It's really not great at things that are beyond in the expert domain. So we have to keep thinking there and keep pushing there. You have the same experience? I know this is more about my answers, but I'd love to hear your thought.
Yeah, I think humans just still have a value in the chain, to your point. But I guess you're saying you're not ringing the bell that AGI is here as yet.
No, it is, but agentic to an endpoint that is already known. It knows what an app looks like for collecting VAS scores at home, or for plugging your device into AirPods so you can communicate. Whatever. This anything that has been done, and you can plug things together, unbelievable. But if it has never been done, hey, go find me a new treatment for OCD. even based on literature, it just never comes up with anything new. And it never sort of sees those weird little oddities that the experts see yet. I don't know if that's agentic AI in your definition, but for me, agentic could just be, it's doing things that are already known, you know? So but nothing novel yet.
It's sort of, obviously, the impacts are so, I guess, broad and deep. So to your point, there's the internal productivity aspect, which generally is a tick, you know, it's 10xing, it's 20xing, it's 50xing my engineers' productivity, impact on the product, but then also very big impact on the sort of competitive dynamic and the ability for others to, disrupt. It kind of feels like everyone is potentially disruptable right now. So a lot for founders like yourself to absorb right now.
Well, that's also why it's good for all of us to be FDA regulated, because you simply cannot. You could 510K, and that's a long process, and you have to do your own physical studies. It's not like somebody like from another country can just quickly code it up and inject it into the US. It has a highly regulated system. And that to me is stay power. So if you want to invest in the future, maybe you don't do the thing where somebody could just code up a better version and charge half the price. They can't do that for us. And that's why I'm really excited, to be in our space.
I think everyone's thinking about moats and long-term competitive barriers. And again, I was joking internally, some of the friction points about the FDA and the health system becomes your friend in this world, because it's not like
for the first time, right?
Exactly.
No, they've always been an excellent source of regulatory agency, but I love that you just said that. They're our friends now, for sure. If they weren't before. That's
right. Well, look, Keith, fantastic to have you on introducing focused ultrasound to the audience, talking about what you're doing at Attune. Wow, we live in interesting times for sure. So thank you for joining the Business of Neurotech podcast. Before I let you go, where do you want to send people that might want to learn more about your work, Attune's work, and what you're doing in the field?
I would say attuneneuro.com is a great start. We have a podcast on focused ultrasound called Fuss Forward. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you want to learn more about the space, or hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any ways you want to engage, we're here. And thanks so much for having me, Adam. This podcast is awesome. It's going to be great.
That's been great.
Or it is great.
It a lot. Thanks so much, Keith. Appreciate your time.
All right. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the show. For more information on the podcast, individual show notes, and all the links about where you can find the show, please visit businessofneurotech.com. We look forward to seeing you on a future episode.